have one topic.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think this will actually be all that long.
Here you go.
Okay, here comes Joe.
Thank you.
Let me let him in. Allison, if you can hear me, I need to see your face. There she is.
Plus, I just want to see Allison's face.
I'm not quite home yet, so I'll do my best, but it's room 1.
That's
I
all
don't know
right.
what room 1 is. Main entrance. Get out. Oh.
That was
Between
kind of funny.
Allison and Joe today.
Joe, you're upside down.
Joe's like his video's sideways.
There you go. Okay.
Okay. I did not know if Catherine or Brenda, if you guys wanted to kind of kick things off.
Sure, I'm happy to.
Okay.
I'll just kind of summarize what we did in the memo. We've talked about this recently in March at Oversight Committee. There was actually a previous meeting, I think in November of last year, or October rather, and then it came up again during the council retreat a couple of weeks ago. So the city, as you all know, has 36 boards, commissions, and committees that we make appointments to. 21 are established by ordinance, 4 by charter, 5 by resolution, and 2 are exist by virtue of a statute or a contract. 1 is by contract only, and then 2 by mayoral appointment. So all but 4 of these require staff support, which means staff is working with chairs to prepare agendas, to prepare the backup materials for agendas, to attend the meeting, do the minutes, that kind of thing. When we talked about this before, we talked about how we could maybe consolidate some committees, and then I know that council had several committees that members wanted to potentially add, and so you see in this memo sort of a discussion of all of those things. There was also more recently discussion about making some of these committees or commissions ward specific. And so we've made some suggestions here on what could be consolidated based on those discussions, what should be ward specific, what committees could be eliminated or re-scoped, and then the need to codify any permanent committee if it's not already codified. We've also talked about increasing committee size to at least 7 members, and so that affects 3 committees. And then we talked about wanting to have some more uniform term lengths and term limits. So with all of that said, I'll just say real quickly, based on the prior discussions, it looked like perhaps the Greenbelt Commission and Planning Commission could be consolidated. This is also a commission that there's been some interest in making it ward specific. So if we were going to rescope their duties, that would be a good time to also make sure that the membership is ward specific going forward. This, would eliminate a step in the development process, but by appointing a member or 2 that has a special focus in this area, they could weigh in on the greenways and green spaces and things like that, certainly at the Planning Commission, and provide that same finding that you all get from the Green Belt Commission now. The Parks Board, Tree Board, and Bicycle Advisory Committee all have some overlapping roles, and so in the memo we proposed that perhaps those 3 could be consolidated based on that. Again, you'd want to probably scope it so that you have those special interests related to trees and bicycles represented on the committee for at least 3 of those appointments. This is also a board, Parks Board, that would be good for ward representation. So you have some assurance that parks all over the city are being looked at and considered. Some committees haven't met regularly, and some have gone beyond the original scope. So we're recommending that they either be eliminated or rescoped. The Animal Welfare Oversight Committee started in 2003 as an ad hoc committee. It might be the longest running ad hoc committee ever, but they obviously have become more permanent and have additional duties that they have been working with and weighing in on. And so that's one that probably should be rescoped and codified so that it can become a permanent committee. The Children's Rights Coordinating Commission was originally designed to educate the community regarding children's needs as they are relevant to child welfare, child care, and sexual exploitation, but it has not met in 3 years. So we're recommending that one is eliminated. Board of Adjustment, Board of Appeals, and Norman Election Commission are the 3 committees that don't have at least 7 members. So that would be something that would be addressed by ordinance to increase those numbers. And then term lengths, when you look through chapter 4, generally on the larger boards with 9 members, they serve 3-year terms. And so if we're going to increase all the committees to 7 to 9 members, it seems that a 3-year term might be appropriate. I know council was really interested in providing opportunities for more citizens to get involved. And so we've recommended here a term limit of 2 consecutive terms. But we want to recognize that there are some committees where we have committee members that have been on there for a decade or longer because they've developed a very specialized expertise. And sometimes we have trouble finding people who would want to take that position. So we want to have some language in there that allows for reappointment for subsequent terms beyond 2 if there hasn't been another qualified applicant for the role. And then finally, the new committees that have been suggested by various council members include a couple of committees that would impact Core Norman, and this has been discussed as potentially a consolidated committee of these ideas. Core Norman Development Committee, the Center City Committee that met over a year ago, I guess now, as an ad hoc committee. We've known they needed to get back together and be reformed to continue looking at the Center City Code. And there's also been discussion about potentially having a similar committee for the Central Norman Zoning Overlay District. We're suggesting that those 2 be combined. They have very common issues, and whatever you do in Center City is probably going to affect the Cinzod area, because if they can't do it in Center City, they're going to try and do it in Cinzod. So we've suggested that as one committee. Committee on Senior Issues was suggested. That's one that we would recommend to be ward specific. The Transportation Committee could be a consolidation of a couple of different ideas, transportation and public transit. It could also include some of the elements of the Bicycle Advisory Committee that is being consolidated into the Parks Board. That obviously they have a role in probably several different facets of city and transportation issues. If formed, our recommendation would be that would be ward specific. A Citizen Budget Committee was suggested, a Youth Advisory Committee, an Energy Committee, but that could possibly be a subcommittee of ECAB. And then it's been suggested that we form a committee regarding gender-based violence. That could be a subcommittee of the Human Rights Commission, but it is important to note that under our current structure, committees appoint their own subcommittees for specialized information. So if we're interested in creating subcommittees, my suggestion would be to take that to the chair of the committee that it best fits under and let them go through the process of creating that rather than codifying it as a permanent committee. And so we just provided all of that really to get the conversation started based on the previous discussions. And I know we've had months between discussions. Sometimes it feels like years, particularly in 2020. So we wanted to give you that summary to kind of start with.
I appreciate that, Catherine. That was an awful lot in a very small amount. You packed a lot of information in there. So I think I just kind of want to go back to kind of the beginning of that and see if we can address these kind of point/piece by piece. So the consolidated committees, Greenbelt and Planning Commission, I don't disagree. My only hesitation with consolidating those 2 is that I have heard from some of the members of the Greenbelt Commission. I think maybe it was early this year, maybe it was late last year. Honestly, I don't remember, about interest in increasing the scope of Greenbelt Commission. They seem to be very interested in taking an active role in identifying areas that maybe can and should be maintained as green belts, whether or not they're tied to any specific development of a parcel. So I'm not bringing that up to say that I therefore don't think that those two should be consolidated, simply that there was interest in taking a more active role in identifying green space, because the limitations of the existing Greenbelt Commission mean that they really can only talk about it as it relates to the particular item in front of them, as opposed to kind of developing a master plan for green belts and green space that they can then kind of actively work towards implementing. I wasn't sure if council members Hall, Patrone, and Carter knew that, so I wanted to make sure to bring that up. I do feel like Planning Commission should be ward specific. I really like the benefits that go along with that, including kind of having a designated representative to help keep me informed, because right now that designated representative is Councilmember Hall. She's really the one to kind of give me the heads up of what's coming down the line. And so I see a lot of benefit to that, but I want to put it out to the group and kind of see what you all think. Don't everyone jump at once.
I guess I'll go. So I like the idea of council members being having a, somebody had brought it before, I don't even remember when, but the idea of being able to get their ward represented by a member of the community on planning. I really think that is incredibly helpful to be able to collaborate with that individual over projects that may be coming our direction. I don't know where to put this in, but one of the things that I have felt like all along that would have been helpful with respect to planning especially, but it could be with all of them, is to understand better how they voted and why, even if it was just a one paragraph, like I voted no because I don't feel like it's consistent with the neighborhood, or I voted yes because I feel like there's, that this is a particular need within the city. Anyway, I know that that's off topic, but I wanted to throw that in there because it wasn't listed in the summary from the beginning. So, but I think it could go for all the committees. But yes, I think it would be helpful. And Councilmember Peacock has spoken extensively to this with planning, and I think that really has the city of Oklahoma City moving projects much more smoothly through the process.
Appreciate that. Councilmember Carter.
Yes, so I mean, I can speak to the only real circumstance I can think of I have firsthand knowledge of is with the South Canadian River Park, where in 2009 the Green Belt Commission gave it its seal of approval, and then consequently parallel, like the as part of the Norman Parks and Rec master plan for parks, also approved that park. And while that stamp of approval is good, it does seems redundant, and I do think they get the opportunity to advocate for green space, through other mechanisms. It just seems like, to streamline it seems like good sense to me, and try and consolidate it to where it's simpler, and simple is usually the key to success. And I just feel like we've got lots of different avenues to advocate for things. So, my 2 cents.
No, I don't disagree with you. And I think if they hadn't expressed an interest in being broader and having a larger scope, I don't think I would have any hesitation at all at consolidating the two. And I don't necessarily know that just because they want to do that doesn't mean there isn't another mechanism through which they can do it, as you've mentioned. Councilmember Hall.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on that part. I guess the piece that I'm a little puzzled by as far as having that roll into planning is when they would actually consider that, because it seems like that's always been part of the staff report to planning. And so when would they take that under consideration, that, you know, that greenbelt piece, where would that happen? Because the project is being presented to the Planning Commission. I just don't understand exactly how that would work. And if there, you know, if there's another way to expand the scope or use the expertise of the people that are I mean, we've got really good expertise on that commission right now. And so if there is another avenue to take advantage of that expertise, I'd like to explore that a little bit. I do fully support having ward-specific planning commissioners. I think that would really be helpful. So I'm hoping that we can move in that direction for sure, but just need a little clarification on how we would consider the greenbelt piece, which I think is pretty important in the planning, the actual planning process as it exists right now.
Brenda or Catherine, do either of you have any thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
and of course, it's not written yet, but I would think that that information would be coming to council as part of the Planning Commission report. The Planning Commission would make that finding related specifically to the green belts, opportunities and things like that when they review the item, so that you all have the benefit of that input when you see the item.
So that would be an added part of their recommendation. So when the project is, so if a project starts in pre-development and goes through planning, then they would have to add that piece as they're considering the project.
Yeah, I think if we still want to have that finding in the record before it gets to you all, that would have to be the way it would be done if they were consolidated.
Okay.
Mayor Clark, I saw your hand went up.
Yeah, I support the ward specific, and I mentioned this, I think, at the retreat. Many cities that have tribes within their city limits include tribes on the planning commission. So I would like to see the 9th spot. If I'm assuming we have 8 wards, there'll be a 9th spot instead of someone having a bonus ward representation, something reserved for the absentee Shawnee.
Like it. Councilmember Carter.
I guess as I was just thinking about my own experiences in building things in Norman as compared to building things in other cities, it's super complicated. So it almost makes, if you're a do-it-yourselfer kind of like me who wants to minimize your expenses, you know, I'm not trying to hire an attorney to walk me through the process. I'm not trying to hire any more engineers than I have to hire. And so, I mean, I'm just kind of thinking ahead to like the tree ordinances. And if we ended up saying having some kind of a tree ordinance for private property, which meant that there would need to be a person in the planning department that checked a box, you know, is that not going to be something similar? You know, is that going to be something that green belts, trees, you know, falls into something within the scope of the office of the city planner? And then, you know, you can always reach out, you know, like a subcommittee that would deal with trees or green belt or something in the circumstance of something that was gray or, you know, not clear cut, needed some expertise. But I think just, it seemed like our council, you know, Kate, we've all kind of talked about trying to make it more, you know, business friendly or user friendly or whatever. And so streamlining the process, ward specific kind of makes great sense. You know, I just think that's just good practice, you know?
Sure. Yeah. And Greenbelt Commission specific, it doesn't necessarily deal with individual trees so much as it deals with opportunities to designate kind of larger green space. And so I think that's why they've kind of chafed at the limits of their authority, because it doesn't happen in every single project. And sometimes it really is just checking a box. And so I certainly think that they can be consolidated to also kind of protect staff's time. My hope is that we could just, whether it's through the tree canopy master plan and the implementation of something like that, or somewhere else,
what
that
I'm
we
talking
give,
about.
that we have opportunities for
Trees are gonna
mechanisms
have to go somewhere, you know,
Yeah.
they're gonna have to go somewhere if we ever do that, you know?
Right.
But, you know, so I'm just saying those seem like they are, you know, they're married
Yeah.
to a certain extent. And, you know, the tree board's kind of in there too, you know. I mean, I've been to a lot of tree board meetings. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what they do, you know.
Yeah.
But,
Well, and we're going to talk about that next, which is why I wanted to bring up the green belt, because I just don't want to lose all mechanisms for dealing with green space and taking an active role in identifying future green space. And so my concern is that if we eliminate Greenbelt Commission by including it in planning, and then also eliminate tree board by including it in parks, that we're cutting all of those vehicles. So, I certainly don't feel one way or the other about Greenbelt specifically, but I do just want to be cognizant about possibly losing all of the vehicles through which we might implement a tree canopy master plan. Mayor Clark.
What about ECAB?
Yeah.
Couldn't they handle some of that?
Yeah, I think they probably could. That's a very good point.
I mean, the
Okay, so it
Parks
looks.
Department-
Go
the
ahead,
Park-
Brenda.
The Parks Department is obviously involved in the internal development review process. So they're always at the table, and they're at the table in Parks Board is in making recommendations for parkland and so forth as plats come through. So it kind of is a natural fit just because they're looking at some of the same things. And what we've heard from some is that why do you have two different committees basically looking at the same things and duplicating efforts? I mean, that's some of the concerns we've heard in the past.
Right. Councilmember Carter.
oh, my mic's still on. So I'm going to take off my city council hat and put on my private citizen hat, which is a tribute to RGB. So back before I was on council and with Rebecca, part of a large number of people that were advocating for trees, I was totally disillusioned by the existing city committees and their inability or lack of. I got nothing out of the tree board, green belt. When I started calling around, hey, I need help, man, it was like nothing, you know? And so to say that they're functioning, I mean, I just don't know what they're supposed to be doing. You know, I mean, I just don't know, you know? And so, you know, I mean, what I've been able to hang my hat on was that parks master plan, you know, and that is a great vehicle. You know, maybe we should review that. I don't know what that's like, but reviewing that every year or every couple years, and then we make a proactive search of existing, you know. I just drove down Highway 9 and right there, there's a big, it says for sale, but it's this giant tree area, you know, right across from where you turn into the trails golf course. It's down the hill and there's a cell tower there. You know, I mean, that should be a park, you know, or something, you know. I mean, I don't know. But you know, there's just all these spots, you know, and so if it becomes a proactive thing, okay, we're doing that, then that makes everyone put their hats on and go, hey, let's think of things that are cool and what we might want to do, and then it gets plugged into this master plan, which gets plugged into a funding formula that makes it possibly happen someday. So
sure. No, and I actually think you've touched on a really a really great opportunity, because that's what Greenbelt Commission, some of the members asked to do, was to be more proactive in identifying spots like right there at Berry and Highway 9 that could be green space or greenbelt. So maybe we don't necessarily have to have a whole lot of concern about that, because when we do a tree canopy master plan or go to reevaluate the parks master plan, there might be kind of, whether it's an ad hoc committee or a full committee, that can be kind of redeveloped around that we eliminate the committees that really aren't doing anything right now. And if the need comes up because we now have a parks master plan and a tree canopy master plan, then we can create a new committee around that fits what we want it to do. So I actually think that might be a better way forward to give me less anxiety about possibly eliminating Greenbelt and eliminating the tree board, because we can redevelop something later that better fits what we're looking for them to do. I am going to move a little bit faster because Brenda told me we only have until 5:30. So I don't want to belabor one point too much. But it sounds like definitely ward specific seats for planning commission, and seems like okay with consolidating Greenbelt Commission into that. So moving on to Parks Board, Tree Board, and Bicycle Advisory Committee. Anyone have any specific thoughts about that, other than it looks like Tree Board can certainly be folded into, whatever that folded into Parks Board, I guess. Anyone have any thoughts one way or the other about Bicycle Advisory Committee being looped into that? And then it sounds like maybe split part into Parks Board, maybe part into a future Transportation Committee. Mayor Clark.
That's all I was going to say, was I think that as long as there's a transportation piece to it, that's a key part of expanding those kind of public transportation options. So that was it.
Great.
The Bicycle Committee currently is a subcommittee of the Council Community Planning and Transportation Committee. That's who they report to. Mm-hmm. So in hindsight, that may be better versed as a subcommittee of that transportation committee if you're going to create that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And that certainly works for me. I do think it fits better into transportation than it does into parks, although obviously with the bike skills course, there is some overlap there as well. But that sounds good to me. I see Councilmember Hall unmuted.
Yeah. Gosh, you're right on it. Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. I mean, as we continue to keep moving forward with the whole notion and building a vision of having a multimodal community, bicycle is definitely a lot more than just recreational anymore. So it makes a lot of sense to have that expertise and, interest under transportation somehow to have a fuller vision of not just moving cars.
Okay. Yeah. And I completely agree with that. And so I think as long as we can, I don't know how you do this in a written form, but at least make sure that the Parks Board doesn't forget about bikes when it comes to trails and possibly another bike skills course, because I'm telling you, I don't know how often you guys drive past the bike skills course at 24th and Lindsay, but I drive past it multiple times a day just because that's the route that I take Ellie to daycare and go and pick her up. I have never not seen someone there using it. Mm-hmm. Every day, every time I go past it, whether it's 8:30 in the morning or 5:30 at night, there are kids out there using it. So I would like to make sure that we continue developing those kinds of things. So I don't want the Parks Board to lose sight of that, but I do think that a bicycle advisory committee fits better in transportation.
Well, and wasn't there a recommendation to make sure that one of the people on that board would be well versed with a bicycle piece? So we could definitely
the specific
keep that
focus. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Just like we have
definitely a lot of overlap. So we were recommending, even if this folded into the Parks Board, you have that representation on the Transportation Committee too, because that's the other piece of the bike community.
So either way you go, we have technical expertise requirements on multiple boards and commissions. So it seems like I would personally be in favor of keeping that bucket of interest and advocacy and expertise present. Either way we go with that.
Yeah. I agree.
And you could
Carter. Sorry.
You could do that too if you're concerned that it might fall off the radar at some point in time. by modifying chapter 4 under the park board duties to say they have to have, representation in certain areas, or spell out the duties better to deal with trails and things like that.
That is also a good recommendation.
Yeah, I like that.
Councilmember Carter. Oh, well, looks like Bria unmuted.
You're muted.
Yeah. Hey, sorry, I'm multitasking. I want to throw in one thing though. It's very, very hard to be ward specific and skill specific. You can't do,
That is true.
I mean, maybe you can do both, but that's something that needs to be on people's minds when we're,
Yeah.
it's like,
I don't think Brenda was saying that the person needed to have the specific skill, just that it be included in their scope.
But I'm reviewing applications right now. So let's say if I get a Ward 7 application and they ride the bus and that's it, but they don't ride a bike. So I'm saying just be mindful of that. What Councilor Hall was saying was with this district commission, some of them are, and same thing with planning commission. So just putting that out there. And I also, Brenda, a note, you and I should probably chat. I don't want to make appointments if we're going to start moving around some boards. I'll point the ones I know are solid. Does that make sense? So heads, okay.
Councilmember Carter.
So back with my private citizen's hat, I've spent a lot of time at the mountain bike trails out at the lake, which, are kind of like, I'm not sure, so we were trying to figure out how to get some maintenance done on them, and you call the state and you don't get any help, and you call the bike committee and they were like, well, we don't know what to do. So I think somebody that, to have a bike person on the planning commission or on the parks board or whatever, that's got more of a direct connection to someone that can create some action might ease frustration in citizens like me. And I agree with you about the bike skills park. We take our grandkids out there all the time, man. It's fantastic. And I cannot see that not becoming more and more of what parks become, because it's literally awesome. And that's where I'm putting my bench, right, Brenda? If I ever get one. But, and when I was talking ward specific, I don't think every committee should be ward specific. I just think like the planning commission or, something like that, so thanks.
Yeah, I thought, I wasn't on the bike thing. It was either going to be parks or transportation. And I don't think either one of those are ward specific, are they?
Not currently, no.
Okay. I don't think we're even talking about that. So,
but Brenda, I do like your idea about including bicycle related issues into the parks board. I think that would be a helpful reminder.
I thought someone had said earlier parks board was because there's parks all over the city. Was that in Catherine's report? Maybe I swore I heard that.
Yes, I think so.
That was a recommendation. We haven't gotten to that one yet, but yeah, that is something we'll be talking about. Okay, so
Joe has another.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Carter.
So I guess to more clearly say what I was thinking, to have a bike person, because then we have transportation, which is obviously a thing, like Councilmember Hall said, and then we have recreation, which is a thing. So to have, instead of having a bike committee that really doesn't do anything, I would just as soon have bike expertise on these two committees that are parks and transportation that are, have a pipeline to a staff person that can be an action person. And, because it's evolving and it's going to continue to branch. That tree is going to continue to branch. It's not going to come back together.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So it looks like on this item, just for Catherine and Brenda's note, it looks like we're okay with consolidating the tree board into parks. And I think I'm going to leave it kind of up to you guys to figure out how best to create some expertise or some focus of bikes into parks and in transportation. Mayor Clark.
I'll throw in there just to be mindful of as we're consolidating, which obviously needs to happen. I've been supporting it for a while. is there going to be a point where we have a board with 15 people on it? Or are we just going to tell everyone like, thanks for your service, you're gone? So we just need to be mindful of that when we're talking about this consolidation process.
Yeah, that was something I was going to bring up at the end, that when we figure out kind of what we want to do, we're going to have to figure out a timeline for that. And, you know, because I agree with Mayor Clark that we shouldn't just say pink slips for everyone, here you go. But maybe we kind of figure out a way to kind of ease into that so it doesn't just happen all at once. But, you know, Catherine and Brenda, I think just kind of leaving it up to you to determine whether or not the bicycle focus on the Parks Board needs to be a seat specific, you know, you have to have some sort of expertise in bikes, or if it just becomes kind of one of the charges of that board to pay attention to, because I do think we need to be mindful about ward specific seats versus industry specific or technical expertise. Councilmember Carter. Oh, you're muted.
You know, I guess what my suggestion might be, just in this merger or consolidation process and being mindful, is simply to it takes a little time, but to talk to those folks and just say, hey, this is what we're thinking about doing. You know, how do you feel about us sunsetting this committee at the end of the year or the end of the fiscal year or in a couple months? You know, and if there's some big pushback, then, you know, but you might be surprised to see that
Sure.
everyone just says, oh yeah, no, that sounds fine, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, but to just get a pink slip in the mail would be like, oh, you
Right.
know, but to call them and say, hey, this is what we're thinking about. What do y'all think? And, you know.
No, I think that's a great point. Councilmember Patron, I saw that you unmuted.
Yeah. I was just going to say that we might also consider making them subcommittees, like how Human Rights has done. So perhaps that rather than pink slipping them, that we say that that they've, you know, merged to be a subcommittee of another one. That's all.
No, I like that thought. Catherine and Brenda, if you could kind of give that a thought exercise and see if that works better for some. Maybe it works better for some than for others. Maybe it works for all of them. Maybe it works for none of them, but I do think it's worth consideration. So we're going to move on to eliminate or rescoped committees, animal welfare oversight. I don't think it's any surprise that I think it should be codified. I think that the committee would appreciate that as well. It's a very, very impactful committee. I didn't see anything in here about making it ward specific. I don't necessarily feel that it needs to be. The one plug I will make is that I would really like to see some rural representation on that committee. The rural areas, especially out in East Norman, have very particular animal related problems that other parts of the city don't experience quite as much. So I think ensuring that we have some east of 48th Street representation, I think would be beneficial, because I think oftentimes East rural Norman in particular, I don't want to discount West rural Norman, but in particular, East rural Norman feels very left behind and forgotten when it comes to animal issues in the city. They deal with dumped dogs at a rate that other parts of the city don't. So that's just something I wanted to throw out there, is ensuring that we have some rural representation on animal welfare oversight, but I do think it needs to be codified. I also think children's rights can fold into the Human Rights Commission. I feel in some ways like it already has. Councilmember Patron, you unmuted.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you just said. And I also had an idea dealing with some lost pets here recently that hopefully we could empower the animal welfare oversight to maybe come up with a centralized Facebook page and website where people can post when they're missing an animal, because there's right now they're going to like 12 different websites and apps, and it's just ridiculous. So I was thinking it'd be nice to have a City of Norman one.
I agree. And when we codify it, this is something that they have brought up as a persistent frustration to them. In the resolution that established that committee, it tasked them with conducting education, yet they don't have a budget. And it's always been kind of unclear to them exactly how they're supposed to be educating the public and doing these kinds of things without a platform, without access even to funding. They're like, do we just ask the city for money? Can we get an account? Like, do we use the donation account? Do we use the animal welfare budget? They just don't really know. So I think if we're going to include asks like educating the public, we need to be providing them a mechanism or a platform or funding to be able to do that. So as we kind of scope them appropriately, being cognizant of that, I think, is going to be really important.
If we codify them as well, what you will see coming back will be terms. Currently, they have no terms.
Yes.
At a staggered, implementation, but that'll be part of it.
Yeah, and that one is going to be one of the ones that has a little bit of heartburn when it comes to term limits and things like that, because they have had a couple members of that committee serve basically since the beginning. And so, it's always hard and painful to kind of make changes that are going to impact a long-serving committee member like that. But at the same time, we do need to be encouraging somewhat more regular turnover and getting more Norman residents involved in these committees. So, I think that having those term limits is going to be good, but when we implement them and how we phase them in is going to minimize the hurt, I think.
Yep.
Okay.
So I just thought I'd hop on with that.
Sorry, yes.
Also. Yeah, that's okay. I think that, there are going to be certain situations where that kind of institutional history or longevity with the issue, or, whatever the charge of the committee is probably going to come up from time to time. And I like the suggestion of, making, having some kind of path to be able to recognize that in certain situations, having someone serve for a long period of time might be in the best interest of the community to do it that way, but that would be the exception, not the rule. Again, using the Historic District Commission, which I've used so many times as an example, currently it's 3 terms of 3 years each. And at that point, you do have to step away, but there is a path to come back after a year. So that's just one way that we've done it for that particular committee. But I do like having a path to recognize that in certain situations that maybe limited expertise or just long time association with the issue is important to continue to have as a presence on the committee or the commission.
Yeah, I agree. And I think especially when it comes to technical expertise, to me, that holds a lot more weight than just longevity served, on a committee. I mean, I think that giving the time to kind of download that institutional knowledge either into written documentation or into someone else is important. But at some point, I mean, I hate to kind of use this as an example because it's a little bit morbid, but at Annie's, we had a long-term employee suddenly pass away. Like just one day did not show up for work because he had a heart attack in his bathroom. He had a lot of institutional knowledge of our company in his head, skills with dogs, knowing what dogs needed and didn't need. And we have another employee now who's probably on a path out in a year or two just because he wants to move on to something else. And we're taking the intentional steps now to put in our software program, download all the notes from his brain about these particular dogs. But what happened to our previous employee also tells me that even when that institutional knowledge is lost, you'll find a way through, because everyone is mortal. And just because someone has that technical expertise does not mean that they won't have a heart attack in their bathroom. So, we all will have to find a way to continue on, even if that institutional knowledge suddenly disappears. And I know that we would, and we will. So, while I do think that it's important to ensure that technical expertise stays on that committee, if at all possible, at some point we just have to, I'm thinking mostly of, committees where it's not technical expertise, they've just served for a long time. At some point, we do still have to have that turnover. And only when we decide to have that turnover are we going to be moving that institutional knowledge out of someone's head and either into someone else's head or in writing. So sometimes I think you just have to make the decision to carry on and make the transition. And it's going to be hard and it's going to be painful, but we're all going to come out the other side and it is going to be okay. Also, my tablet just died. I didn't realize it had so little battery, which means I will have to either get some help moving through the rest of the staff report or do it from memory. Councilmember Carter.
Well, as a guy that was on the Animal Welfare Committee for 11 years, I do think term limits would be fine.
And they survived without you.
Oh, I know. No, well, you know, in that committee, Sandra Rose and I and Mark back in the 2000s, animal shelter, you know, and advocate for that. And, you know, that was its scope, and it certainly has morphed into something, and it is useful. But yeah, I don't see any problem with putting term limits on it and codifying it to good purpose. And I don't think, I mean, if you guys told me I had to get off that committee after 3 years, I would have been doing backflips. I couldn't find another veterinarian to do it. So
I do think that is one, of course, we have the technical expertise, the veterinarian requirements, which I think is necessary, especially for that particular committee. But that does mean we might have to work doubly and triply hard to find someone to serve. So we'll just have to kind of keep that in mind. Does anyone have any other thoughts about the children's rights, about either folding that into Human Rights Commission or just kind of eliminating it? Okay. I believe from memory, the next thing was amending Chapter 4 to codify all of these committees.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. I did not have any problems with that. I don't know if anyone else had any problems with codifying all of them. I assume not. Okay.
It makes it easier too when, especially down the road when you're looking for stuff and you can't figure out why this committee's not in the code and this one, you know, it'll just be better if it's all consolidated.
Okay. Then yeah, that sounds good to me. What was next?
Increasing the committee positions to 7 members for those 3 boards that currently have 5, which is Board of Adjustment, Board of Appeals, and Norman Election Commission. But I will say we have a very difficult time finding the expertise on Board of Appeals sometimes, so it might be hard. They do have a alternate that gets called in when they're short, so that and they don't meet very often either, so it may not be as big a deal for them. But I can say from personal experience on the Election Commission, there are times when we can't meet because I don't have a quorum with 5 members. So I can see the benefit of increasing that.
Okay. I mean, I think never more so than recently have we learned how important having a local election commission can be. And I also think that might be one that needs to be rescoped. That can be a discussion for another time. I think they need to cover more than just candidates and PACs, because we have a lot of political activity happening in this city and no idea what goes on behind it. But I think that increasing that to, so if we increased it, remind me, if we increased it to 7, that would mean they only have to have 5 for a quorum?
4.
4. Okay. And right now, because it's 5,
they have to have 3.
They have to have 3. And that's still tough sometimes?
Not all the time, but in some years, yeah, I mean, you know, and it has to do with just availability of the members too sometimes. But yeah, I've canceled a couple of, and because they don't meet like every month, a lot of times they'll forget they have a meeting. And so I mean, it's just a lot of different things.
Yeah. I don't have any problem increasing it to 7. And do you think we're going to have any difficulty finding people for it? They're not all technical positions, are they? Okay.
No, they're not technical at all.
Okay. Then I definitely don't see any issues with that. Anyone else? Yes, or no? Okay.
Nope.
So I think election commission is fine. I don't see why we would necessarily have to increase Board of Adjustments and Board of Appeals if it's going to be difficult to find people and you're not really having trouble getting a quorum to have them meet. Then I think we could probably leave those.
Board of Adjustment, Jane is on the call, and I know we've had conversations about that before if she wants to weigh in.
Good afternoon. It really would be beneficial on Board of Adjustment if we could get that to 7. We've got a really good group on there right now, and so maybe in the next year or so we won't have a problem. But prior to getting the group that we have on right now, we struggled almost monthly to make sure that we had the members there to get the votes.
The other wrinkle too with the Board of Adjustment is it requires a certain number of votes, kind of like council. So
I see.
if you have just a quorum, you need a unanimous vote.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I don't have any issues increasing that to 7.
Board of Appeals is probably fine. Do you think, Jane?
Yes, Board of Appeals, I honestly cannot tell you the last time they met. And like you said, they have the alternate that can come in. So I think that one's fine.
Okay. Then all right. Then I think increase Election Commission to 7, increase Board of Adjustments to 7, and leave Board of Appeals alone.
Okay, and the next section is ward-specific committee representation. And the two that were recommended were Planning Commission and Board of Parks. Certainly, you've already touched on Planning Commission. I don't know if you formally decided Parks needed to have ward representation or not. I'm not sure how you landed on that one.
I mean, I think it would be helpful. I mean, obviously we have parks in every ward, but I think Mayor Clark had touched on an excellent point that if we were going to make one of the seats on the Parks Board a bicycle specific seat, then are we going to end up with a 15-person unwieldy board? I think if Brenda and Catherine, if you guys decide that it seems like it would be coverage enough to just have it included in the scope of the Parks Board and not have it be a specific seat, then I think ward specific seats would be fine. But I agree with Mayor Clark. I don't think we need a double-digit sized Parks Board. So happy to take any other feedback on that.
Our dais isn't big enough.
Yeah. Councilmember Hall.
Oh, I was just going to say, obviously, speed reading through the report, I missed completely the board's, the park commissioner being ward specific. So I definitely understand your point, Mayor Clark, about not making it even harder to appoint people. So I don't, that one I can see going either way. I think it's really important to have that tree board and the tree piece and the bicycle piece represented there. So I'm pretty adamant about Planning Commission. I'm more on the fence of the Parks Board. So I understand your point, Mayor.
Mayor Clark.
Speaking of that, I lean towards having the Parks Board be more, I guess what we're calling skill specific, because we're about to have Ruby Grant, which is our first accessible park. And so if we really want to create more accessible parks, not only for people in wheelchairs, just for, elderly people who need different kinds of swings and whatnot, I think that is a way to go, because I've seen a lot of almost exercise equipment, and I know there's the full, the national fitness piece, but little pieces that can go at random parks and that are very senior friendly. But I had my ACL replaced and I was in the same boat. So things like that. So I lean towards skill specific for parks, and then you got dog parks. So, and maybe one could be for, certain areas, but I would go skill specific on that one.
So it looks like there is support for ward specific for Planning Commission, and then even doubling down on skill specificity for Parks Board.
When you say skill specific, are you meaning more so just delineate more in their duties what all they are supposed to be doing, or actually having somebody on there that, when I hear skill specific, I think of you have to have a plumber and a electrician, that kind of thing, and they have to meet that criteria. If you listed it in the duties that these are the things that you need to be reviewing as you look at parks.
Brenda, I lean towards like what we do with the Historic District Commission. where some have to live in the historic district, some have to be a realtor, some, or, something like that.
That's what I was actually kind of thinking along Mayor Clark's lines. Like someone who competes in, bicycle, tournaments, someone who has a bike focus in their lives, or someone who, has a child with a disability who needs, who wants to be able to weigh in on things like that. I mean, I don't think that it necessarily needs to be, I work in bicycles or I work in accessibility fields, but, a particular interest, even if it's just a hobby focus. Maybe I'm misinterpreting, but Councilmember Hall.
I was just going to say almost even more of an advocacy interest rather than a skill set, because I think we have, yeah.
Okay, that makes
All
sense. Your next area was term limits, and what was written in the staff report was 2 terms. And I know that Mayor Clark has been talking about implementing a 3-term limit. So I guess you could discuss which you would prefer to. I mean, most of our terms are 3 years, so that would be 6 years or 9 years. I mean, it's what you're looking at.
I'm happy to explain what in a little more detail. So like, unless they resign, it's almost an automatic reappointment to the 2nd term, but then we are more active in asking, so would you like that 3rd term? So I do think we've talked about having the longevity and the history of the board, but I think no more than 3 terms, but that was what I had envisioned with the 3 terms, was those automatic and then actively asking. And of course, Brenda, will you explain how somebody gets removed from a board?
They can only be removed from a board by a vote of council. So just like council confirms the appointments, you would have to take a vote at a meeting to remove somebody.
I was meaning
or
more
unless they, if they miss 3 consecutive meetings, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you, then they're under the code, they're automatically ineligible to continue to serve. Or if they move out of Norman, and then for those that are ward specific, if they move out of their ward, what we've done is let them continue to serve until the end of that term, but then they can't be reappointed because they no longer live in that ward.
Yeah, that'll make sense to me. I agree with that. I would like to see, unless it is such a technical seat that it really can't be filled, I would like to see no more than 3 terms served consecutively, just because, we already struggle to get new people into these boards and commissions. And I would much rather have to work harder to find someone to fill a seat that has been termed out than to just try and, extend. So, I think necessity is the mother of invention. And if I'm required to find someone for a Ward 1 seat, or just interested in finding someone for a seat because they've termed out, I think that I'd rather bend someone's arm behind their back to try and get them to fill a seat than to, continue with the same faces that we always see.
Okay.
Councilmember Patron.
I would like, since we're going back to the drawing board on some of this, I would like to see it, if they're a ward specific and they move outside of the ward, maybe they have 3 or 6 months, but I wouldn't do to, what if they just started their 2nd term? They're going to be in that seat for 3 years and the ward's doesn't have representation, especially if, think about planning. If we're talking about putting ward specific seats on planning,
Mm-hmm.
I don't
That's
know.
fair.
I think we should switch that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When I was thinking serve out the rest of the term, I was thinking, okay, 3 to 6 months, that wouldn't be so bad. But if we are talking 3-year terms and they just got sworn in for their next term, a month or 2 ago, that is a really long time to have them be in that seat.
Okay. The final thing that we're up to now are the potential new committees that have been discussed previously. The Core Norman Development Committee, the Committee on Senior Issues, the Transportation Committee, the Budget Committee, Advisory Committee, Energy Committee, which could be a subcommittee of ECAB, and then the Gender-Based Violence, which could be a subcommittee of Human Rights.
So I feel pretty strongly about obviously core Norman development. I think that checks a lot of boxes of things that we're already doing, things that we have in the works, and things that are a little slower to get off the ground, but we're still working on, like an expansion of the Senzod. So I think that's really important. And I mean, frankly, I think a senior committee, considering we've got, or in the works, knock on wood, a brand new senior center, having a formalized senior committee to, to work on that, plus other things, I think is important. And then of course the transportation committee that we've almost been talking about like it's a given, which I think hopefully that is the sentiment. I still feel pretty strongly about a citizens budget committee. I just think that would connect people to the budget process a little bit better, and maybe give us a little bit, kind of like we did the stormwater citizens committee, to just develop more buy-in and more understanding of the budget and the budget process through a citizens committee. I don't remember discussion about the energy committee though. So if that was someone's, I'm sorry, it didn't not encode in my brain very well. But Councilmember Hall unmuted, so I'm going to let you go.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. You can keep going. I'll circle back.
Okay. And then Brenda, remind me, I think I missed one in that.
The gender-based violence subcommittee of human rights.
Mayor Clark, sorry.
I'll throw in, I had always envisioned that being a subcommittee of the Human Rights Commission.
Okay.
So I think maybe, even just a memo to them about why we thought it was important, and then they can decide, because I know Brenda and Catherine had said that, the committees usually develop their own subcommittees, but at least if we could send a memo to them, letting them know why we thought it was important and what we were hoping they'd be able to identify and accomplish, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't agree.
Okay.
Anyone else have any thoughts?
Yep,
Councilmember Hall.
I do. I really am okay with everything that you just summarized. The only comment I wanted to make about the first one, the Core Norman Development Committee, I really do like the idea of that, because the Senzod and the issues that continue to be ongoing with Center City Form-Based Code are really hand in glove. And as far as staffing that, I think that would be more efficient on the part of the planning department to be able to staff that as one committee, rather than, dividing that up into two committees, or, however we would do that. So I'm definitely in favor of that. My only caveat is I really want to get going on the ad hoc committee that's still in place. So I don't know what the timeline is for making all of these changes, but I don't really want to wait too much longer to reconvene the Center City ad hoc committee that is already in place. So I'm fine with consolidating this and however we do it down the road, but I don't want that to delay addressing some very pressing issues with Center City and the Senzod issue too. So that's all.
Brenda, might you be able to give a sense? Let's say we move, a slate of recommendations out of oversight today, and it starts making its way through the full council process. How long do you think it would take to get a new committee like a Core Norman Development Committee up and running?
Well, I mean,
Mayor Clark.
Yeah, based on Mayor Clark's comments.
That's what I was going to add in. I've kind of slowed everything down. No, wait, I didn't slow everything down. The state legislature slowed everything down for failing to allow us to continue to meet virtually in a pandemic. But I can't in good conscience ask our residents who are volunteers, who don't make the whopping $100 that we do, to meet right now, unless it's we're still defining mission critical. But unfortunately, that will slow this process down.
Well, and I was thinking, pandemic aside, just kind of in a basic administrative capacity, how long does it take to get a new committee up and running?
I mean, once council adopted it, it wouldn't, it's just a matter of adopting the ordinance and waiting the 30 days before it's effective.
Okay. I just didn't know. I've never been a part of a full new committee creation process.
And then of course, advertising for applications and so forth. Okay. But that could be done during the 30 days you're waiting for the effective date of the ordinance.
Sure. So, I mean, Councilmember Hall, kind of with all due respect, I kind of feel like the pandemic has, as Mayor Clark said, really delayed any meetings at this point, because that Center City Committee is a big committee and they can't meet virtually. So, I mean, I feel like everything has kind of had a pin put in it, at least for now.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Well, and I don't want you to be confused with the visioning committee, which was a really large committee. The ad hoc committee that met last year and came forward with amendments for council was a much smaller committee.
It was
So
still what, 15? I thought it was between 10 and 15 people.
it might
I know
have
the
been
visioning committee was
Yeah.
40 or 50 plus, but I
Yeah.
thought that the ad hoc committee was still 10 to 15 people.
I don't, maybe not quite that big, but
I don't know.
close. Yeah. But, and really my intention there had been to get that going after the first of the year. So we still have some time there, but I just, I can, continue chipping away at all that in other ways, but it would be really helpful to have that committee going. And I
Jane, did you
understand
wanna-
we're in a pandemic.
Go ahead, Jane. Sorry.
Thank you.
Give
I'm
Jane
sorry.
Just a second, Allison.
I'm so sorry. I just want to ask a question real quick. Regarding the Center City Form-Based Code Ad Hoc Committee, can that committee address things regarding the SINZOD?
Well, in this new Core Norm and Development Committee, they would.
Right. I was just thinking if we got that going at the first of the year, but the Norman Development Committee had not been established yet. Councilmember Hall mentioned the SINZOD. So I just wanted to get clarification on that.
I mean, I don't know that there's anything preventing
Yeah, I
them
mean, we'd
from
have to look
Catherine
at-
can probably speak to that.
If it was created by resolution, just sort of what that charge was. This is going to end up being a pretty big ordinance that's coming to you all to codify all this and get it all together. Yeah. And it may be that the timing works out that by the time we get all that done, we're also back, the legislature's done what they need to do, and we're back doing virtual meetings and everything's operating like it's been the last 8 months.
Oh, that's true. So,
Yes.
Councilmember Hall, I don't think that it necessarily needs to be one or the other at this point. Since we're not looking at, really getting even the Center City Ad Hoc Committee up at least until the beginning of the year, it might be that we circle back the first week of January, and if it looks like, knock on wood, things are a little bit better and it is possible to meet, great. If not, then, maybe it is just another month or so down the road when we do get the opportunity to meet virtually, and then we can kind of see where the big rescoping ordinance is in relation to, getting the Center City Ad Hoc Committee back up and running.
I understand, because literally the mayor and I started talking about this last March, like 3 days before we had a shutdown. So it's already been stalled and it's already been delayed. And I certainly understand our current situation. I just want to make sure we do keep it on the front burner. And for long term, as we look at the package that we're going to put together here, I'm definitely in favor of combining or including, I guess would be a better way to say it, all of the issues surrounding the current SINZOD, and be able to have the scope of the committee be able to address all those issues too, instead of, to combine that and broaden the scope, I guess would be the easiest way to say it. And I think that's probably what Ms. Hudson is looking for as well.
Well, and I would put my plug in here now that as we're defining what mission critical is, that maybe controversial boundary pushing Center City projects aren't that. So, my hope is that there wouldn't be a need to have maybe gotten that committee back up and running, at least right now. I don't know why those would be considered mission critical, but we'll see. So, but I think that, so it looks like Core Norm and Development Committee is a yes. How does everyone feel about the Committee on Senior Issues, or the Senior Center Advisory Committee, or kind of how a committee centered around seniors?
I happen to think it's hugely important to have a committee that senior issues are unique, and I actually think that that's a very wise thing to put together. I was also going to say that I'm when you all were talking about whether or not we can have Zoom meetings with committees, I think that that's by ordinance that we don't allow it. So if we wanted, and Catherine could speak more to that than the Open Meetings Act, I think we could do an emergency allowance for them.
Oh.
We've adopted essentially the Open Meeting Act into our code and by resolution, saying that all of our boards, commissions, and committees must follow the Open Meeting Act. So that's why when it changed, we were able to go to Zoom, and that's why we're preparing to go back. That definition of what constitutes a public body has changed in the last 2 legislative sessions, and I haven't looked at it in terms of our current committees because we were already following it, but I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Appreciate that. Okay, so it looks like senior committee in whatever form of words it takes. Do we think that there could be a way to structure the name and the scope of this committee that it is not exclusively tied to the senior center, but is also not so broad that they lose the ability to impact the senior center? Brenda or Catherine, do you think you'd be able to find that balance where it allows for kind of impact on senior center programming, kind of I'm thinking down the road once it's built and developed and we continue to add programming, but also kind of broader senior issues? Mayor Clark.
For some reason, maybe it's Dave Beck, but the visitability issue, I keep hitting on that. So, I mean, right there's 2 issues, not just the senior center and programming. We touched on park issues.
Yep.
So I think just throwing that out there to help think of a good name.
Well, I want it to be broad enough to have impact across the city, but not so broad that they lose their ability to have an impact on a specific topic or issue area. And I feel like that's probably always the balance that we're trying to find with these committees. But that's my hope, is that we can figure out a way to make it broad enough that it doesn't exclude anything, but not so broad that it waters down their impact. Okay, and I think we've talked a lot about the transportation committee already. Catherine and Brenda, do you think you've got enough feedback on that to kind of know how to move it along?
I think so, yes. The one that I forgot to mention was that youth advisory committee. And I think before, when that came up, we talked about maybe retooling or rescoping this youth council that's currently working. And, instead of creating an entirely new committee, but I think that might have been Mayor Clark's suggestion.
Yeah, Mayor Clark.
Yep, I'll throw my 2 cents in. So I created the student resident roundtable, and we have been meeting, obviously. And every time I've tried to have a meeting with students, like my teen book club, it's rough. People are zoomed out, so I'm just kind of letting it sit for now. But when we met before the shutdown, so last year, it was very insightful. But I don't want to add more. And so I think retooling the youth council is a fantastic idea. And if mayors want to have their own roundtable, they can. It just met monthly. Didn't need to be staffed. It was just a great opportunity for me to get insight that I would then share with you. But I also think our youth council needs to be more than just touring our sites. I think we can put them to work a little bit.
I agree.
The OML conference last year, I don't know, I have no concept of time after 2020, but I'll have to remember which city, but their youth council, like they elect their own council within the council, and they do mock meetings, and it's intense. And so I think we could maybe not go that far with it, but beef it up enough where, they have what are the issues in your city? And it ends with not just getting a certificate, but with a presentation to council about these are issues. I love, because they always talk about what they did, which is nice, and I love it. But I would love to hear a little bit more in depth and push them a little bit more, because it is a resume builder. But right now it just feels a little fluffy. And I think we already have it's already staffed. And so I think Jeannie Snyder, and we didn't do it this year for obvious reasons, but she does a great job. And I'd be happy to work with her and try and build it up a little bit more without adding a whole nother board and commission.
I like that. More model UN type kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that idea. I really do. And when you think about, and I think that the members of that council would probably really be energized by that too, of having mission, a mission more than just understanding how the city works and stuff like that. And I was just thinking about Elliot Kometz and all of the energy that he poured into the Vote 16 project, which is, still hanging out there. He, to put the energy and the focus of that young man, plus the other students that were helping him with that. I'd love to see that energy and that passion, added to the council, that they could be in a position to recommend things that they'd like to see happen in Norman. So I love that idea of taking a look at that and beefing it up.
Yeah, I agree.
And then the budget committee is the other one. We heard from you, Chairman Pearman. Sorry, I'm losing my words.
That's all right. That's all right. Yeah, no, this was actually something that was brought to me by a Norman resident who had lived, I think it was in Illinois. And she was like, I've lived in like 30 different cities in Illinois. I was an independent auditor. I went around and, audited a bunch of different cities. And she said, and I've always believed that the cities that had the most transparent budget, that had citizens who were more deeply involved in their city and in their city's budget process, had a citizens budget committee. And, and it immediately brought to my mind the stormwater citizens committee, that the more residents who can get their hands into what the city is doing, the better they understand it, the less jumping to conclusions there are. And, they become better advocates for what the city does and how the city does it. And so, there are plenty of different ways that this could come to fruition. It could be just a budget committee that is constituted for the budget process and, is a part of that budget process, or it could be an annual committee that then only meets, during the budget development process. But this is something that is not uncommon in other cities and other states. And, considering I don't know the best way to say this, but we have people who come into the budget process at all different times. And, no matter how many public budget hearings we seem to have and where we spread them kind of throughout the budget process, no one ever shows up until the last minute. And so figuring out ways to kind of get more people involved throughout that process, I think can only help us. Maybe this isn't the right way to go. And this is just kind of the beginning of a conversation about how to get more citizens involved in the process. But, a resident brought this to me and I thought it was a great starting point for a conversation. Mayor Clark.
As the chair of the finance committee, and as you know, in our committee chair meetings, sometimes it's like, well, what do we put in finance? And so my concern would be if we had a citizen finance committee, they'd run into the same problem. So my thought was, I agree, having them engaged, I think that one would need to be word specific. But what if it was quarterly and was a subcommittee of the finance committee?
Oh, there we go. I like it. That they could meet. Do you think maybe meeting more frequently throughout kind of, I know we talk about the budget all year, but kind of that formal post mid-year adjustment, budget development phase, having them actually come to finance monthly and do it with the finance committee every single month. Because I know that the finance committee during the budget development process is a lot more hands-on, and that might be a good time to kind of get them meeting.
That's kind of the downside to the subcommittee. And we run into that in conversations with HRC and how we're going to do the inclusive community subcommittee. And so what we came up with there was a representative from the inclusive community subcommittee presents to the Human Rights Commission about what they did at their previous meeting. And so if you have like the chair of the subcommittee could attend, I think, every finance meeting and finance committee meeting, because we don't really vote. And then they could report to the subcommittee, and then they could report to finance committee about what the subcommittee did, like the bicycle advisory committee does.
No, I like that. And I think maybe one thing that would be also great for either that chair or maybe for the body as a whole is to either write something that can be presented at one or multiple of the public budget hearings, or have a representative come and speak either about recommendations that the Citizens Budget Committee has given or just their thoughts on how the budget process has gone so far. I'd love to actually see more citizens speaking at the budget hearings, and this would at least be a way to guarantee at least one. Hey,
Yeah,
whatever we can get.
Yep.
Okay, then yeah, I think that's a great way to handle it. It reduces the impact on staff time, because that was something that I was concerned about was, I feel like we're three committees down and now about 3 committees up. So at least we're about at the place that we've started, but at least these committees can hopefully be more effective and scoped more appropriately. So this would be a way to not add too much more to staff's plate. So I like that.
Okay, well, I think that takes us to the end.
Cool. 5 minutes to spare.
Woohoo! And you're right. That adds. It's kind of a wash. 3 new committees, and because the other 4 that are listed are subcommittees of another committee, so it won't be as hopefully as intensive on staff support as some of the others.
Well, and I'd like to think that at least these would be more effective and have a bigger impact. And so, it might be a wash, but hopefully we've at least raised the bar in terms of effectiveness and activity level. So, Mayor Clark.
What about the question of how many committees people can serve on at the same time?
One at a time.
That's
Technically, right now, they can only serve on one unless the other one that they're serving on is like, well, EDAB has a provision that allows them to serve on more than one. And then if it's like an ad hoc committee, so it's not a permanent ongoing committee, they can serve on an ad hoc committee and a permanent committee, but otherwise they can't be on 2 permanent committees.
And Councilor Patron, I'll tell you my personal experience when I was on the Norman Forward Sales Tax Citizen Financial Oversight Board. I was kind of like an ex officio member to the library board because I reported to both and had been on the library board. So I was technically listed on 2 for that reason. So I'm comfortable with the existing rule for that reason. It's got to be an ad hoc, but otherwise we have enough citizens in this town. You don't need to be on 2 boards.
So my worry with that is that the Charter Review Commission has now presented a little bit of an issue with that because, some of it was a little bit of a holdover, but we have someone who serves on the hospital board, also serving on the Charter Review Commission and presenting and then also voting on issues that affect the hospital board. So, I don't know what changes to the rule would have prevented that from happening, because I do think it was just an oversight. We basically reactivated the Charter Review Commission that had come before us and then just kind of made some adjustments, and this was missed in that. But, I think there are some, I don't know if we consider Charter Review Commission an ad hoc committee. It's not a standing committee, but it is in the charter. I know, but I guess some temporary committees are maybe have a little bit more of a lasting impact than others. So, I do think that we have kind of a recent example of something falling through the cracks on that. And I don't necessarily know the best way to address it, but that's a pretty big one.
Recusal would have been the most appropriate, obviously, but I guess what is the exemption for EDAB? What's the reasoning on that one?
When EDAB was created, my recollection is there was a desire for some pretty specialized experience. And so they were worried that, with all the other boards and commissions we have, that we may be losing some of that experience if we make that a rule that they can't serve on both, on 2.
And the thought too was they weren't meeting, they were only going to come together when they had, once they got established, when they had a specific project to consider and look at.
And that was true.
Okay. Well, it feels like we have, in a town our size, a city, we've got plenty of talent. I mean, whether it's on us to be reaching out to find that talent, if they don't know that there's, spots on boards and commissions, then we need to do a better job as council members, making sure that we're bringing in new talent and fresh eyes. So I really think it's important that we don't have people sitting on more than one board or commission, if in a voting capacity, especially. I mean, if they're not really voting, if you're doing this ex officio type of situation, that's one thing. But if you're actually able to essentially have 2 votes over something, it's not necessary. We have a big city full of lots of talent. So I would encourage us to put an end to that. You're either on one or the other, and otherwise we get into this, well, the person should have recused and didn't, and how does that look? That's my personal opinion.
Yeah. I think let's see, Catherine and Brenda, if there's a way to kind of, if we can find language for that and see if there's any, if we just say one committee at a time, how many people does that affect right now?
Okay, we can look at that.
Okay. And I know it's 5:30 and I know Brenda has to go. Are there any parting comments before we take off?
I appreciate you guys fighting a migraine. That's why I've been sitting in the dark. So
I get you.
Going like a few days on it now.
I'm going to be writing up kind of a summary of this and sending it out tomorrow, because Councilmember Holman could not be here. And I know he's really interested in this. So keep an eye on your email. I'll try and, obviously these aren't formal minutes. So this is just going to be kind of my handwritten notes and personal recollections. So when I do send this out, if there's anything that I missed or is incorrect, please feel free to correct the record for everyone else. So Joe, you joined us right at the very end. Mayor Clark, did you?
I was just going to add, I know it's kind of a wash, but I think it streamlines a lot of things, makes it more business friendly, and also takes away committees that aren't meeting and recognizes the needs that we're now facing today, especially with the transportation committee now that we've inherited a bus system. So I'm again, sorry we didn't reduce the workload, but I do think this is a better system.
I think we've made it a more effective workload. I agree. All right.
Okay.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.